Thank you for joining my webcast today. My name is Adele Eden. I'm the Director of Development here at Pharma Electronic Technology Services, MAP USA. Today, what I want to do is I want to put a really quick webcast. We have been asked by customers that actually downloaded the community version. They actually want to play or QA the paid version. So we usually, on the paid version, we actually do the deployment, but I'm actually going to walk you high level on how you actually deploy, at least configure the one administration server using the paid bits. This is actually this does not apply to the community version, because the community version you're connecting to our cloud, so you don't really do the initial configuration. Initial configuration does exist for you. So after you actually run the setup for both the DB server and the admin server, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, I have put in there is a link in our channel which you can actually watch the different components in the sequence of which we actually deploy different components. But once you actually run the setup for those, you actually have to configure them. And I've been putting this little applet, this little app that we have, the admin configurator, in a lot of the videos, because I am as learning this huge product that we have as I'm going here. So I figured we'll put in those videos so people can actually see the steps. The first initial installation, and right now I have a totally empty database, so let me move this aside here. Let me close some of this stuff right here in so database is totally blank. There's other tables and so forth, but right now I'm just showing you that it's totally blank. We have nothing in our database. Everything is empty. Again, I'm doing this on SQL. When you actually install the DB server, it asks you which database you want to connect to. You can be SQL or Oracle, as long as there is a provider for it in Entity Framework. Because the DB server is a Windows solution, it's a core solution, a .NET Core. It will actually, as long as there is, it doesn't even have to be Oracle or Microsoft SQL. It can be any other database, as long as there is a core provider for it. We don't do anything outside the norm for database connection. So the first thing that would happen is you will actually download one of the links that we give you with the letter, the welcome letter. You download the admin configurator. It looks like this. I've been using it across the board in a lot of my videos, and I'm going to use it less as we move forward and more into the progression of these videos, but on this channel. But the first thing you would need to do at this point, if you're doing the deployment for a paid version, if you don't want us to come in and do the deployment for you, you will actually have to initialize the database and so forth. So what I want to do here, run some of the initialization things that we do for you on the paid version, but you can do them yourself. And I'll show you the steps to do them and the sequence you need to do them. What we're going to do is actually do the 4 steps that are needed, and that is to actually initialize some of the lookup tables, upload the license file, and then run some form of a data sync that will actually create what our data sync actually does. It contacts our MPS, our Microsoft Private Store, downloads the latest version of some lookups, some zip codes, and so forth. It does an update locally for you, and walk you through, and then get into the tool to do a couple things. And I'll walk you through a couple of things that you probably have to do right off the bat if you requested the paid version because you want to play with it, and you don't want to play with it and you get emails coming out of our email server, because that's what it defaults to, for receipts and messages and passwords and user IDs and so forth. So I'll walk you through a quick step and through the magic of video editing. I'll stop some of the long processors, some of the long processes that will actually go and download new stuff, at least from a lookup perspective. So you ran the tool for the first time. You're looking at the screen, you go, what do I do next? Actually, when it first starts, it would look more or less like this. Okay, it may not have the link. I just put them in there because I don't want you to watch me type it. But it will look like this. So I really like to open our flyout and go into full mode here. Again, I'm trying to keep it at 1024 by 768. My screen is a 4K, so I'm trying to actually just grab a small portion of the screen. So if you have a lower resolution screen, it'll be more this is what you'll see. In reality, it actually would look much nicer when you're running it on a 1920 by 1080 or your desktop machine. If you're running on a tablet, it would more or less looks like that. We force on the tablet to be in land mode, in landscape mode. Anyway, so moving real quickly here, what is the first thing you do once you do this? The first thing you need to do, even before you load in the licensing file, and I put in a video on how to actually import the licensing file for this specific tool. I'll walk through it again one more time here. But the first thing you need to do, if we did not do the deployment for you, if you got the paid version and we did not do the deployment, you want to do the deployment. You open that flyout on that first screen. You still have to put in the URL to the administration server that you want to connect to and the user ID and password, the correct user ID and password of the key we send you, of the license file that we send you. With that being said, the first thing you need to do here is click on this data sync. And I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to click on it. And what would happen is you get this dialog box saying, are you sure you want to do this? Because this is going to take a long time. And the reason for that is going to try to go through. It does two modes. It tries to go to our MPS to download new zip codes, new brands, whatever. A lot of the new lookup stuff. And if it failed, it will actually default to whatever we have inside the bits themselves. Okay, I'm going to say yes here. You get this data sync, and what I want to do is I have an attached debugger. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, here it is. Well, I guess it's not allowing me. Attached debugger. That's actually you'll see what it's doing. So through the magic of it's actually I have the debugging turned on the DB server, so you'll see everything it's doing, but it's going to take a while, as the dialog box stated. Are you sure you want to do this? So I'm just showing you that it's doing a whole lot of stuff on the DB server with the database. It's actually creating stuff. It downloaded new zip codes, for example, for the region you're in and so forth. So I'll let it go through, and through the magic of, as I said, video editing, I'll stop it until it's done. Okay, now that it is done, what would have happened is your database at this point on from a DB server perspective is configured at least with the minimum that it needs to actually operate. Now, as I said, for the paid version, we do this for you, but there are a couple of things that you need to do. For example, you need to immediately change the SMPT services, because otherwise it will come through our mail server. A couple of things that I'll walk through real quickly, or at least a minimum, and I'll put other videos, following videos on our channel to actually how to continue doing this. One of the things that I really like to actually point out at this point is, and I put a video on our security token communication. As you saw before, everything was plain. Even though I just ran the first data sync, what it did, it actually used my own instant of my machine to actually encrypt even the content between the two, going back and forth. If you're interested in learning more about this, I put in a webcast on our channel talking about that. So now you've actually configured at least the lookup tables and so forth with the latest data. Now the next step is to actually upload a licensing file. This is a licensing file we give you. The licensing file is a bit different for the paid version than it is for the community version, the CV version, but for all practical purposes, the content is almost exactly the same. The expiration date is a bit different, but other than that, the content of your company name, your unique identifier that we use on top of the we use portion of it in the encryption and so forth. So the next step is to actually upload the licensing file, and I'm actually hosting this on IIS. So we have in the IIS in the www root folder a licensing folder that's empty. What's going to happen here is let me leave this up here. I'm going to upload the licensing file. This is not bringing the licensing file to this instant of the application. This configurator, this admin configurator, is still not licensed. But this is a step you need to do to make the admin server, after you sync the data, to make it a licensed admin server. Otherwise, it will not reply to anything. So the next step after you do a data sync is to upload the licensing server. So you click on this guy, and I have a number of licensing servers on my C drive here. So this is one of the this is C:\\, I think that's what it is. I'm using my training one because it has 100 years. Once I do that, you'll see on the IS side, it immediately had it actually uploaded that licensing file to the server, and it saved it in there. It tells you, of course, in the app. Of course, you wouldn't be having this open, but I'm just trying to show you what's exactly going on. Okay, what would happen here is once you do this, it will actually keep the licensing file itself, but it will actually, as it's running, every time you restart IS or restart IS Express, it will read this file and generate a temporary one that it loads in memory. And that is, we want to go 100% uptime. So if you actually, for example, your license file expires, we can actually send you a new licensing file that you can upload again. And what would happen is it will actually copy the licensing company XDLL file, but it'll actually load on the next connection a new version of it, so you can, it's not in use, and it can keep running. So you're 100% uptime. So again, of course, you wouldn't have these things open because that's actually running on, should be running on the server. I'm running everything here on this local machine, but you saw that coming. Now I want to actually do something. I want to actually delete it. And you'll see an error message. So you permanently want to delete yes. And you can see that second file, because at that point, that's the licensing file that is being used by the admin server. It says it can't delete it because it's in use. It's loaded. So I'm going to skip it. I'm going to go OK, but I need to actually, at this point, because there is no licensing file, if I stop this machine or I stop IS and restart, it wouldn't find the licensing file .dll to actually, so admin server at that point would be invalid. So I'm going to upload it again. So I'm going to upload the file again, and you'll see it actually created a new instant. It retired the old one. And what would happen here at this point is you'll actually, we have a table called maintenance activity. It will actually register for the DB server for its next cycle to actually delete that old one, this one right here. Okay, moving forward, now that I uploaded the the licensing file, now I need to make this instance of this tool licensed. So I need to import that license to this tool. So follow me. First of all, DB server, data sync for the DB server, upload the licensing file for the admin server, and now I need to actually activate this instance of the configurator, and that is using that licensing file. Now the error went away, and I click on save, and I put a video on what it actually creates. At this point, it actually communicates using the token, our key, your key, the whole 9 yards. And if you're interested in more of the security, I'm starting to put out some webcasts on our channel, but it's actually going to do a couple of things here. It's much faster. I don't have to stop it at this point. It really just checks, and it tells the admin server to go back to our PC if the port is open, to make sure that it got the latest. And the last thing it does, it actually will bring down a couple of the lookup tables. Nothing here requires security, stuff like zip code, states, and so forth. Now you're inside the tool. So now you're actually activated DB server with the correct lookup tables and initial data. You're activated the administration server with the licensing file. And now you activated the tool itself, the admin tool, the admin configurator tool. Now you want to log into the system, and you get to the screen, and I'm going to log in. And we do not have a corporation yet. The first, right off the bat, the 3 things you need to create immediately, and you'll see the tool will actually complain that you don't have them, and it'll walk you through them. You have to create an administrator for the system. That's a global administrator. Because it's a brand new install, it's you don't do this in the CV. The global administrator is us. If you do the on-premise, or if you're a reseller, you actually have to configure a global administrator. That first password that we give you is only good for the deployment. Once you go and create an administrator and a corporation, the corporation is the owner of that DB server, admin server. In the CV version, that's us. In the paid version, that's you. Once you create the corporation and then you create a site and a lane, you're done. That password, that license system knows it's configured. It does. You can't use them. Actually, will complain if you try to use them. So real quickly here, I'm going to click on OK because I have the correct information. The corporation of that, it says it's root because it doesn't know there's no corporation configured yet. And as I said, the system is smart enough. Admin server at this point knows this is the first time you're running. You need to configure at least one administrator, and this is what I'm going to do first. So I'm going to create a dummy user for the administrator here. So I'm going to give him the name and John. Let me stop the recording. You don't want to watch me type. So I filled this first screen. I'm going to create a fictitious user, John Smith, fictitious social security number. You can go ahead and fill more of this stuff. A couple of these things, if you're actually using our components to do payment, if you clocking users in, clocking users out, managing time for POS users, managing time to pay, we actually do. You have to fill out some of this stuff, but actually to just create an administrator has to be an employee of the company. So you just have to fill that first screen. So I actually created that user. Now I'm going to actually let the system generate an ID, and it actually generated that ID for me. I can actually click on this button. What would happen? It will contact the administration server to figure out if that login is valid. So you may have 10 John Smiths, and all of them use John Smith 132. Now, if you have a different pattern for your user ID, so let's say you do J Smith, then you can override it. And when you type it in, you can actually click on check, and it will check if it's available. So if you got 200 multiple John Smiths, you can actually try until you find available one, or you can actually create on generated, and this will give you a random one enough that it will be unique. Most likely it will be unique. That's why we have scenarios where it wasn't after we ran testing for our test scripts for 5 days. One or two were not unique. But again, as I said, if you have your own pattern of creating user IDs, that's fine. You can just override the created one. And what I'm going to do at this point, anything you do here, really nothing gets saved. It's actually sitting in memory until you get to the last, and I want to do it manually here by clicking on the tabs. You have to create on this finish and save. And this finish and save, the reason for this is we want to give you the ability to take a last look at what you put in there before you save it. Specifically because we actually do, you may have to, if you're using our our payroll package, let's say you entered somebody's address. So let's say they live at 123 some street circle, and they are in Charlotte. And I'll talk about where these defaults come from in a second, or I'll put a video. We have something called global settings. Even the questions that come up for race, if you're Canada, they're different than they are if you're a US. And again, you click on add. Nothing here is saved yet to the admin server. It's still sitting in memory in this instant of the tool. Nothing until you come down to all the way bottom here. All the way to wow. Okay. You have to scroll all the way down to save, and you'll see since I added an address that showed up. Okay, so now I'm going to save it. You can actually print this, so you can print the receipt with the name and so forth, but I'm not going to. So we actually create the user ID and password based on what you gave for the user ID. They are forced to change it the next time they log in. Okay, so that's the admin. Now, it has to continue and finish the installation with the user ID and password that are in the license file. So we're going to click on OK. I'm not going to print it right now, but if you want to print this to keep it for your record, you can print it. You can print it to, whatever printer you have installed, but I'm going to move on. So next thing it goes, and I said earlier, you have to configure administrator, you have to configure corporation. You don't do this in the CV version because we are your corporation in a sense. If you're in, but since we're installing a paid version, you are the cloud solution for all our components that you purchase from us. For the POS, for the mid-to-bed, for everything, you are the cloud solution. So this admin server or part of the admin server farm, it needs to actually have a corporation. So the next step is here, we're going to create a corporation. So the system's smart enough to know, oh, I don't have a corporation configured. So we're going to come up here in Corp info, and we're going to actually create an empty corporation here. And let me go full screen again. And we're going to call it, in this case, map. Let's call it map ETS/USA space USA. And let's create a fictitious tax ID, IEN 123-456-978. Okay, I think that's all I needed to do here. I can, again, nothing is saved yet. You can add in more if you have a little bit more. Logos is important. This is, we'll get back to it. I'll put a webcast on how to use logos. Logos is what print on the receipt. You can tell us based on a region or a site which logo to print. Corporate fax numbers, if you have multiple locations that have multiple fax numbers, they have multiple phone numbers, you can add comments. You have a pharmacy in building A, you have a clinic that has an attached gift shop in building C. The services for the contact for that building is different. You can add more phone numbers with comments and so forth. We're trying to be holistic with the solution. You don't really have to create a lot of this, but you can. So you can have a complete picture of your deployment and corporation. We actually do stuff called object graphs, and I'll talk about them in a second because I'll show you the object graph for that one user we just created, the admin user. But again, nothing is saved until I get to that last finish and save. As more data as I put, I can review it here, go back, and I can add a comment. Let's say initial configuration. Okay, so I'm gonna put in just a comment, and now when I come back here, you'll see the more data you put, the more stuff you'll see on this last form that you can review before you update. So I'm gonna update now, and what that does now, we created an administrator, global administrator for the system. We are creating a global corporate account for your cloud solution because again, your admin server and servers are your cloud solution. It's on premise. If you're using the CV, you're coming to us. It's a pass-through. If you're interested on the architecture of our solutions, please see a webcast I put out on the different components and the difference between the paid version, the PV, and the CV version. Again, the system's still missing some stuff. As I said, you need to configure a site and at least a lane. A lane, by the way, doesn't have to be a POS. It can be a kiosk. It can be a mail-out station. It can be, and I'll walk through creating one in a second. So now it tells me that it needs the site configured. So I'm going to go in and configure a site. Okay, and what I need to do here is go global. Okay, so now I get to the site. Site needs at least two things. You need to create a site, and it actually tells you at least one site and one lane, I think. So I'm figuring this as I go here with you. So let's call this site main building. And let me actually stop the recording so you don't see me type. So what I've done here is I filled up the first site, and I just called it main building. You can call it whatever. Let's say you guys have, when you deploy it, you have naming convention for your buildings, for your corporation, or even if you just have a small pharmacy or a small clinic, you call it 123 Providence Road. It doesn't. So most of this stuff is descriptional for completion purposes, but you may have actually a physical site number that you use for your accounting, for your GL, for your reorder. You can actually create a site short number. That's the one that shows up on all the components. Be in POS, be in Midst-to-Bed, be in the kiosk. It shows up the site that it's actually logged into, and then you can have your own site number that's more or less internal to your system. If you don't have one for GL purposes, you can actually click on it will generate one for you, and we usually generate extensive GUID. But let's say you do have one, and it's the, let's say your convention is this airport dash the building number or the site number. I don't know. Okay, so now that's failed. Now if I try to go and save this, actually it will not like it. It will actually tell me that, hey, you don't have, and it does, at least one lane must be configured. Now, okay, so I need to actually go back in here, and let me scroll back, or I can actually use this lane data. Okay, I need to configure at least one lane. Well, in this case, really, I'm not configuring a POS or anything. I just want to configure a site and a lane. Lane types are, and I'm going to start down here. Lane types is everything we support. So in this case, this is really nothing. This is, we're not doing anything in here. At a minimum, you can actually create this in an accounting, so you can track that site. Now you can add more lanes to the site, being you can add POSs, you can Android customer ownership. If you have a pickup location, this is a delivery where people come in and pick up stuff. You're attaching a doorbuster. If you want to hear about all the slew of devices and components that we do, this actually represent more or less all of them. Let's say you actually want to use our media center on a kiosk where you put in a TV and just show ads. You can make this lane as a kiosk. Okay, so I'm going to say, I'm going to give it the name main TV at entrance. Okay, description, I'm just going to say we will show our greatest work here. You're going to put in a TV that's going to play back a bunch of videos. There's nothing here to track. You're not doing GL work. You're not selling anything. You're not POS. You're going to give this a number. Usually a lot of people who are using just a media center, they will actually put in the serial number of that TV so they can track it. You don't have to, but let's just put in any number. Manufacturer, let's say it was made by LG. The kiosk device, we said it was a kiosk. So I'm going to add it, and it's connected to our media center. Now I should be able to save and close. Come back down here and click on save. And at that point, I have a full configured DB server, admin server, with licensing, with the initial data for the system to run. I'm up to about 30 minutes, so I'm going to stop and follow this with a different webcast because the next thing we need to do is to go through global settings and explain what they are. Global settings, if you're in Canada, for example, you want to ask different race questions, they actually apply differently in different countries. So since I'm defaulting to the US, the kind of questions we ask for races are a bit different than the ones we ask in Canada, for example. Same apply for default zip code. You can change the default zip code to, let's say you don't, I have it in Charlotte. I'm actually in Toronto, but I'm having it, my previous life I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, so I'm putting Charlotte because we're part of the US division of Medem Pharma, so I'm putting a Charlotte zip code, but you can put in any zip code you want. It will start defaulting in almost everything for that in that zip code. Being on the POS, being on the tools themselves, it will default to that zip code and you can change it. Default OTC barcodes. This is over-the-counter barcodes. Again, I'll go and put in another webcast for a little bit more on the initial configuration. But once you actually do these steps and you get inside this tool, and it looks a lot like this, you're in. You've actually have successfully configured a DB server, an admin server, and loaded the correct licensing file, and you're ready to, at a minimum, you can actually go in now and create some menus for your POS and download the POS and run it. If I can find, yeah, menu operations. Or you can actually run the POS. But you have to actually configure stuff if you sell OTC items. I'll walk through how you can configure Vantiv, WorldPay, TSYS, Chase, the ones I know. I don't know how to do UPS. I still have not learned that, but we'll actually walk you through how to manually configure your device depending on which device you've actually created. You still have to actually go in and create a new lane that's a POS or a device that accepts credit card, and I'll put a webcast on how to do this. But again, at this point, you're fully configured. Your DB server and your admin server is configured. They have enough to actually operate any of our components, any of our applications that you downloaded that you want to run, including a POS, including mids to beds, everything but credit card, because I have not walked you through configuring at least one credit card gateway. Thank you very much for watching this video. I didn't want to go over 30 minutes, and I'm at 30 minutes right now. Thank you very much. You all have a wonderful day.